I'm now writing an article on tyrants, primarily because of our situation now, where we have somebody who thinks he's a king, who acts like a tyrant, and the tyranny that he has spewed forth among his cabinet is destroying this nation.
Today's guest is my former colleague, Dr. Gale A. Gale, you were the first Asian American and first woman of color as the president of the Society of Biblical Literature, which has more than 100 years of history. Can you share your experience?
Oh, my. Well, I remember the day when Sidney White Crawford sent me an email saying that I was the president-elect of the Society of Biblical Literature. I thought, gee, she must have the wrong person. I just could not believe it. But I did really good work. The work I did from a literary critical perspective, the work I did from a socio-historical perspective, the work I did from an Asian American perspective, I feel I did a good job. However, even coming close to when I had to give the address, where you always have imposter syndrome. I don't deserve this. I'm a DEI person. I didn't call it DEI at the time, but I was the bone that was given to the racial ethnics and the women because I fit into both those categories. But you always have that feeling of self-consciousness, even as an Asian American in a white society experiencing racism. You always felt inferior. You always felt second class. Even going up to the time of the address, I didn't deserve this. And having to go up those stairs and give that address, I was shaking. I don't know if any men have felt the same way. All right. And they certainly would not have felt what I felt because I'm the first Asian American and first woman of color to be in that position. Society of Biblical Literature is a institution. Even now, I don't see much intersectionality going on, and it's still highly historical critical, which is all right. Going to those meetings, I primarily go to the works on racial ethnic minorities. I go to the work of those who are working on poverty and economics, and I kind of get bored with the rest at these meetings. I feel that being the first Asian American and woman of color, it doesn't put a burden on me, but I feel obligated to help out those who are women and those who are persons of color. And I feel that there's a role for me as the president to do that.
Gale, you have contributed a lot to Asian American feminist biblical interpretation. Is there a distinct approach to looking at the Bible from an Asian American perspective?
No, there isn't. There are so many here in the States will fall under that big umbrella category, Asian American. We have Koreans, we have Japanese, we have South Asian, Vietnamese. And then when you have the wider Asian countries, they have different experiences than we do. And the thing that connects us all who claim that is just simply the fact that we fall under this umbrella term Asian American, but we have many different understandings of what it means to be an Asian American biblical scholar.
And so when you look at the Bible, are there particular frames of reference that you will bring looking at it as an Asian American woman? Do you look for particular power dynamics or motifs or themes?
Approaching a biblical text, I will look for the voiceless, those who do not seem to have a voice, those marginal characters that you hardly pay attention to, the servants, the ordinary farmers who work that land, 90% of the population in ancient Israel. So I look for if there's any voices that might come through in the biblical text. It took me a while to become, first of all, a feminist biblical scholar. I was not a women's liber in college. Even in grad school, I was primarily trying to get a PhD, having to take 6 language exams. It was only when I had my first job at the College of St. Thomas when a person in the English department wanted me to team teach with her women in theology and literature. And so I was reading all of these feminist books. And it's not that I didn't have any interest, Also, during that time, this is like the 80s, when I was asked to be co-chair of the Women in Biblical World section. And so, of course, I had to read and judge proposals and listen to their talks of women in the biblical world section. And I was slowly acknowledging that with my reading and all the papers I had to adjudicate, that I was a feminist. I was in the 90s that you sent me this invitation in 1994 to talk about my own identity as an Asian American or Chinese American at the time, and how it fit into the politics of the U.S. Going into this big room with all these Asian Americans, that I just went, gee, this is something I have to look into. And I met people like you. I met Jung Ha Kim. I met Mary Foskett. Rita Brock was living in Minnesota at the time, in the Twin Cities. So we got together and I started working on her conference on 150 years of Asian America. So that was the start of it. And then I was asked to be part of the Committee on Underrepresented Racial and Ethnic Minorities in the Profession. Vincent Wimbush and Randall Bailey, who were the Blacks, African Americans. Fernando Segovia was the Hispanic. And then there was Henry Sun, who was an Old Testament. And then I evidently was the woman, the feminist, all right? But when Henry Sun dropped out, I also became the Asian American as well as a feminist. Also at that time, C. Karwan came up to me and asked me if I would be part of one of the founding members of the Ethnic Chinese Biblical Colloquium. So there I met more Asian biblical scholars. And so we got the gender and you got the race, but knowing my own background, coming from a very poor family, living in the slums of Chicago. And also, I was very concerned about poverty and actually war. One of my students at EDS showed me a video of a young woman who was giving a TED Talk on intersectionality. And I said, oh, that's what I am. That's what I do. And so that's where I started finding out intersectionality is a whole field in political science and sociology, in literature and philosophy. So I started reading up on that. I was consider myself an intersectional scholar in the sense that I do my own research. I need to take into consideration gender, race, and class, how they interconnect with each other. So that's where the intersectionality comes in.
And Gale, you and I are both of Chinese background, but you are the third generation Chinese American. I am an immigrant Chinese who came to the United States doing graduate studies. So can you share with us your experience early on about racism?
Racism was very much a part of my growing up in a white-dominated society, and I didn't experience it for the first 10 years because I lived in the slums of Chicago and my friends were Blacks and Puerto Ricans. I didn't experience it in that setting. But then we moved to a white neighborhood, which of course in a few years became Black because of redlining. I didn't understand that at the time. Now I do. I just knew that all my white friends were moving out and these Blacks were moving in. And it was being in the grade school where I experienced racism. Young kids can be really very racist. I was in grade school and it was a Catholic school. And the guy who sat behind me every day would say, "Ching," right into my neck. And I had to put up with this for an hour for that class. The homeroom teacher was a nun saying that we are all divided up in homogeneous groupings. And I remember that big word, homogeneous groupings. And what that meant, we were grouped into group one, who are, of course, all the white people. And then going down to four, which would be the racial ethnic minorities and the lower class whites. And we were what they called the dum-dum group. And I was in that group, of course, and I knew that I shouldn't have been a part of that group. But I wasn't white. I couldn't do anything about it. Now, I do remember trying to find apartments. I read the ad saying, come on over. And then when they see me saying that the apartment's already taken, I did get involved was more in the anti-war group, but that was also very much the civil rights group. And when I was in college, and, it was very meaningful to be associated with both the anti-war group and the anti-racism group. When I got to graduate school in Toronto, I can't say that I experienced racism there. I experienced more sexism because most of the classes I was in, I was with all men. The sexism wasn't overt, but I think they really kind of looked at me a little weird. It was primarily when I got my first job in a very white and very rich school, which is the University of St. Thomas, very Roman Catholic, in a department that was anti-feminist. I don't think they were anti-racist, they were more anti-feminist. They had concerns that I was being a feminist. In fact, I was the only woman in the department at the time. And I was getting involved, like I said, teaching in the women in theology and literature classes, and then the other feminist classes. And I was also writing feminist biblical works. And I became the director of women's studies for the 5 colleges in the area. So it was very much a part of my resume, but they still had questions about it for my third-year review, and fifth-year review is my 10-year review. So they had problems with it in my 10-year review, and then had problems with me being a feminist when I came up as a professor. And of course, I wrote back saying feminism has been a field for many years now, so get with it, guys. And I wrote a much nicer letter than that. It was more my feminism that I had problems with. Maybe racism was a part of it. I'm not sure, but certainly feminism.
When I first attended the meetings of the Society of Biblical Literature, I said, wow, this society was so white. I'm talking about almost 40-some years ago. And so have you seen changes in your field, given that now you have more women and more scholars of color joining the guild?
It's been hopeful since the 1980s in my own journey as a feminist and my own journey in the 1990s as an Asian American scholar.
So in theology, we have liberation theology, you have feminist theology. Now it has exerted some influence in the field. What about in the Bible?
Oh, I would definitely say so. When I attend the women's breakfast, we have all the books that had come out by the women's. Mind you, a lot of them are historical critical, which is all right. It's also when I go to the racial ethnic luncheons and hearing the books that come out there, it's very exciting. So yes, I would say women have made an achievement at the Society of Biblical Literature. And I would say the racial ethnics, but not as much as I would expect. I do keep track of a lot of what is written, maybe because I get Old Testament abstracts, which I read a lot. I just wanted to see what's going on in the field.
Now, you are a Hebrew Bible scholar. I want to talk about the ethics of using the Hebrew Bible, because the Bible has been used to support or justify Christian nationalism, Christian Zionism. So the interpretation of the Bible cannot be neutral these days. And can you share with the audience your take about the appropriate ways of using the Bible?
Okay, it galls me of the abuse of the Bible that I see in the public sphere. Because I sit there, where did you do your seminary? Especially when you see pastors coming off with this stuff. First of all, it's very disheartening because of the lack of education regarding the Bible. But that goes back to the churches. How do they interpret the Bible? And especially the Roman Catholics only came on the scene regarding the Bible much more recently, but among Protestants, and again, as a former Roman Catholic, I'm more of that Roman Catholic ethos, but I don't know how to change Protestant churches. I go to an Episcopalian church, but it's pretty progressive. But see, when the Bible and that very evangelical fundamentalist interpretation is so ingrained, I'm not sure how I could deal with it because I have no part in those churches. I'm now writing an article on Tyrants. primarily because of our situation now, where we have somebody who thinks he's a king, who acts like a tyrant, and the tyranny that he has spewed forth among his cabinet is destroying this nation. That's how I am trying to deal with that. When I see the abuse of the Bible in the public square, I don't know how to deal with it.
This week, I had the opportunity of visiting Villanova University, and that is the school where Pope Leo is an alum. He had a grand celebration of the 1-year anniversary of his papacy. When you look at Pope Leo as a former Catholic, do you like what he has done, especially addressing the Iran war?
For sure. I am so glad he's doing it, and I'm so glad he's using his position to preach the gospel, which will, of course, completely critique what's going on in the society because of our present administration. First of all, I was shocked when he got elected, all right, on the second ballot. How did that happen? It must be the Holy Spirit. But I have been very pleased that he has come forth and become an advocate for immigrants, an advocate for the poor, an advocate against war. And he's from the Chicago South Side, which I'm from the.
Exactly.
So I will keep praying that he continues to be a prophet, preaching the gospel and criticizing our administration. And I think he's doing a good job.
Thank you very much. I will see you in the next episode.
Bye-bye.